The Cold War that threatened the entire free world was waged from 1946 to December 1991. 45 years, the longest conflict in this nation's history. It was a very real war that all too often became confrontational, hostile, and dangerous. A hot war. There were casualties, and lives were lost. For 42 of those years, the 55th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing, the current wing's immediate predecessor, was in the forefront during those perilous times of vigilance and deterrence. This tribute is for the valiant Cold War warriors who helped prevent a nuclear holocaust and won that war. Winston Churchill in 1946 delivered the definitive assessment of the start of the Cold War. A shadow has fallen upon the scene so lately lighted by the Allied victory. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. 55th aircraft were launched on a global mission of strategic reconnaissance and surveillance to track the expanding military deployments of Soviet forces, Eastern Europe bloc countries, Communist China, and North Korea. By 1950, with the outbreak of the Korean War, 55th RB-50s patrolled the landscape and paid the price for that surveillance. As that war ended, the Russians shot down a 55th RB-50 with a crew of 17 aboard. Only the co-pilot is known to have survived. As a mark of the 55th spirit, the widow of the aircraft commander continues to attend the 55th Association reunions. The RB-47 became the 55th's primary mission aircraft in the mid-1950s from Forbes Air Force Base, Kansas. The Soviets struck again on July 1, 1960, when they shot down the six-engine jet over international waters over the Arctic's Barents Sea. Only the co-pilot and navigator survived and were imprisoned by the Russians in the infamous Lubyanka prison in Moscow for 7 months. But Cold War crises continued. President Kennedy announced to the nation in October 1962, "Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. I have directed that our surveillance be stepped up." 55th aircraft were significant elements to that surveillance. 3 RB-47s were lost with all hands during that crisis. In 1965, other aggressors pressed hostile action. North Korean MiGs attacked a 55th RB-47 over international waters. The 55th co-pilot returned fire at a MiG-17 from the tail guns, and the bogey nosed up abruptly, then pitched over into a steep dive, and was last observed going straight down. Despite heavy battle damage, the aircraft commander managed to land the recon aircraft successfully with all hands safe. By 1970, the Soviets were showing their aggressive intentions again, as intercepting fighters fired warning shots near a 55th RC-135 special mission aircraft over Arctic waters. Undeterred, the 55th crew members pressed forward and completed their mission, much to the surprise and dismay of the Russians. The intelligence provided by those 55th missions was invaluable. Advancements in Soviet and Chinese radars were revealed, and electronic countermeasures were developed by the U.S. to foil those radars. The U.S. kept abreast of and took the lead in the continuing Cold War battles, thanks to the 55th being at the tip of the spear, from the skies over Kansas and Nebraska to those over many faraway places around the globe. The clarion call sounded by President Reagan in 1987 at the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin inspired all peoples desiring freedom and signaled that the end of the Cold War was inevitable. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Then in January 1987, President Reagan gave Americans a clear statement of national security policy. We must never forget that freedom is never really free. It is the most costly thing in the world. Freedom is never paid for in a lump sum. Installments come due in every generation. All any of us can do is to offer the generations that follow a chance for freedom. And as President George H.W. Bush so proudly proclaimed, the Cold War didn't just end, it was won. The 55th SRW Memorial was dedicated at the Memorial Gardens of the National Museum of the Air Force near Dayton, Ohio on 5 September 2003. On this monument are listed the names of 61 members of the Fightin' 55th who lost their lives in the line of duty while serving their country during the Cold War. It is an impressive tribute. With us tonight are many Cold War veterans who served in the 55th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing. Would you please stand and be recognized?